All right, from the studio in Fairfax City, we are very grateful that David Franklin accepted our invitation to our show. David, welcome to my humble podcast.
Claudio, it is absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
No, no problem. Let's go back to the beginning in your life. How did you study music to begin with? Were you born like in a musical family or so?
No, as a matter of fact, there was nobody really in my family who was a musician. I grew up in New Jersey, and um, I had an incident at age 12 where really kind of traumatizing for me, and my grades all dropped, and I really felt like I didn't have the ability to do well academically. And so what happened for me is that I I had just started playing some musical instruments, and I decided maybe I'm not smart, but you don't have to be smart to be a musician. So I just started focusing on the musical world and teaching myself guitar, piano, and just feeling like this was the way that I wanted to engage with this world, with the world around me. So it was more like it was more driven by or inspired, I suppose, by just feeling a sense of wanting to connect with stuff with something bigger than myself.
Got you. In high school, were you in any band or part
Yeah,
of?
I was that was still part of my learning time, but I was in some bands, but in college is where I really started playing in bands and doing a lot more performing. The one instrument I had lessons on was drum kit, and so in college I actually supported myself as a drummer. But I was in different musical projects. I was writing music. Um, I began writing almost as soon as I began playing guitar, like when I was about 10 or 11. I just felt the need to kind of express s- stuff that I felt because I felt things very deeply, and I didn't know what to do with what I felt. So when I could create something out of that, it just felt really important, a way to express my humanity somehow, or my what was going on for me when the world was very thinking and talking around me. It seemed I had a place to put how I felt so I could kind of feel out loud somehow.
So got you. So eventually you finish high school. Any pressure for your parent to say they were telling you, forget about music, you're not going to make any money, go to become a lawyer, become a doctor, whatever, do music in the background, or you pretty much were kind of free to choose and your own path, make your own mistakes and learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a what I would call a blue collar neighborhood, a blue collar family, and so
Yeah.
definitely was pressure to let this music thing go by the wayside and do something that
Mm.
felt, do something that would, make money. And yet, in some ways, I mean, I'm not suggesting I'm amazingly successful in the money regard, but I think that a lot of the ways in which I've been successful in my life have been because of my connection to music and my understanding of other ways of feeling, other ways of being, other ways of understanding the human condition and relationships between people. Yeah.
Fascinating what you mentioned before, a couple of minutes ago, where you say, well, inside of me, there was a calling for music, or music was in the background. It wasn't there. It was there. I didn't know what to do with that, but always stay there, right? So some people in general, whatever music, art, poetry, whatever art in general, they don't follow that, right? So they stay always on the background, right? And then as they grow old, they look back at their life and say, man, I really wanted to be a chef. I'm a doctor, whatever. I could be a chef part-time, side of something, help people out and doing whatever, right? But it's important to do something about it and find a way, so that calling will find a way in your life, and eventually you will allocate time to do that, whatever hobbies or music is or painting or whatever. It's important that you didn't give up. And and that, and you did something with it.
Absolutely. And to me, I think it's sad when people don't follow their heart's calling. I
Mm.
mean, I, not, I would say not everybody's calling, if they have one, is something that is going to make them money or going, or whatever it may be. But at least for me, it feels like I'm being true to myself and true to a part of me that, like I feel like this is a gift that I've been given in this life, and I want,
Absolutely.
I want to dance with this. I don't want to be, yeah, I don't want to shun it. I'll also say this, like I probably was a different kind of kid, but like at the age of 12, I didn't tell anybody this, but I made a decision to not miss a day of my life playing a musical instrument. And so I made a commitment to myself to play every single day. And, with very few exceptions, I've kept that up even to this age.
Good for
Just
you.
because
Yeah.
it's like this is a life partner of mine, and I wanted to really be in relationship with it. And it's been fascinating to be in relationship. Like music is still the spirit of music somehow, but who I am as I get older, or I, have children or get married, or, you know, look at, approaching 60, like who I am is shifting, but I have kind of a way to like there's a line going through my life, which is this musical sense where I have a way to look at my relationship to that and how I've changed and how
Mm.
my experience and my expression of music has changed.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned that, so you went to college and then you were playing, a way to, as a part-time job or make a little bit of money when someone goes to college. You were playing drums in different pubs and different bands. Feel
Yeah.
free to elaborate on how that came about.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was funny because these gigs were like 4 hour gigs, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And then like sometimes I was a science major in college, and sometimes like in between sets, like I'd have 10 minutes and I'd be studying for my chemistry exam the next day. But it just felt right. Like it um also because I believe that at least the way that I understand science, there's very much of a creative place within it and an inspired place. I mean, I know that there's logic when it comes to math and science, and I think there's also a spirit that's infused within it. And some of my classes, particularly like organic chemistry, I think I did way better in because I was a musician. It just had a musical
Mm.
I had a musical way of kind of understanding how these yeah how these chemicals and bonds were held in space somehow.
Mm.
um yeah.
It's a high correlation between people that, at least in my field, in computer science, that they like music or they are playing instrument or they go to a lot of concert. I mean, if the correlation was zero point 0.2, like 20% or 30%, we say, well, an accident, right? But if you ask 100 people, 200 people in pools in different cities, different background, a lot of people in computer science, they are, I don't know, zero point 0.6 or zero point 0.7, peak correlation between music and kind of computer science. I have no idea why that, but it's beautiful the way it is. So
I've also noticed a number of doctors and people in the healing professions are musicians.
yeah,
A lot of therapists, psychotherapists that I know
yeah.
are musicians or creative people. And to me, I think when somebody is thinking, kind of jumping ahead here maybe, but when somebody is thinking about doctoring or being a therapist or something, maybe one is thinking about how to cure an illness, but I think
So,
about healing as being something different. Healing as being, how does one transcend something? And I think that involves a thinking space as well as a feeling state to reach a place where healing can happen, which to me is beyond curing an illness, but it is like transcending some sort of illness.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Back in the 90s, right, you end up joining the Global Walk for a Livable World. Feel free to elaborate on what it meant to you and what that was all about.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Claudio. I
Mhm.
was so I studied environmental science in college in the 80s, and then I worked in that field for a couple of years in New York City. And I realized like people in general had very little curiosity about environmental things at that point kind of to come. And my professors in the mid 80s were talking about climate change and what would happen and storms getting worse and water getting scarce in certain areas. Like they made these predictions quite well, unfortunately. So I worked in the environmental field for a few years and I realized people were not ready to hear this. So I heard about a group of people that were about to embark on a walk across the country from Los Angeles to New York City, and I quit my job and joined them and spent a year walking across the country. And it was to the we believed it was to educate others about environmental challenges and issues, and in part that happened. And we spoke at schools and colleges, and even to like congressmen when we got to Washington, D.C. However, it was me who ended up learning a lot as I met people and heard their stories and met people who didn't necessarily think like me or feel like me, and yet their stories were very profound and important. Um, and I should say during this walk, I realized that the environmental challenges are much less about science and much more about the human condition. Because if humans agreed that we were going to respond to this 100%, we would probably still be able to make some really good inroads with it. However, when I realized that this is more about people's ability to hold challenging truths or what to do with hard truths, that's when I decided to go back to grad school and become a psychotherapist. So that was part of my journey there.
Why psychotherapy? From you went from science to kind of psychology area, the hard science, and you mentioned chemistry and bonding structure. That's organic, inorganic chemistry. I'm an engineer, so I took chemistry. Well, that's complicated, very hard to understand all the molecules and figure out the bones and ion and so forth to go to a more from kind of science to more humanist, social science way of thinking in psychology, psychotherapy. What was the motivation behind that?
I I I still am rooting for humans on planet Earth, and I still am hoping that we figure
Yeah.
out how to transcend a lot of the things that we are involved in that could essentially lead to our destruction. And so I wanted to be part of. I think this comes from the spirit of music. Like it just taught me, like even if somebody thinks completely different than me or feels completely different, they're still my fellow human on the planet. And
Mm.
I so there's that. I would also say this, as complicated as organic chemistry is, it follows a set of rules. And those rules in general don't change unless other conditions or variables change. Where humans could do one thing 100 times in a row and then on the 101st do it differently. And there's mystery to how humans work. And to me, it speaks to like the creativity of what it is. I guess and part of the process of understanding people and meeting people. And to me, humans being with other humans is kind of the ultimate art form. Like it's very easy somehow at times for people to be with those who agree with them completely, but being with those who disagree with us, I believe, is kind of an art form, and that that calls to me actually. I actually like when people don't agree with me because I it would be boring otherwise.
Absolutely. If everybody were to think the same or like the same food, if everybody like Chinese food, nobody will go to the Italian restaurant. or vice versa, right? So it's good to be. It's funny the way the psychology work on human beings, in the sense that someone could have, I don't know, 5 kids, right, with the same parent, right? The same parent, the same teaching, work hard in life, go to school, do the right thing in life, help people out, whatever that means, family, and then each one of these 4 kids would be very different from one another,
Right.
as if the nurture versus nature, and people will do what they want to do, what they're meant to do, or what they should do, independent of in the background that they were born in. And they were taught by the same parent, kind of the same rule, don't fight, don't go to college, make some money, find a wife, boyfriend, whatever, and then each individual will do their own thing in life, independent, and like branches of trees, and they will diverge, I don't know, until 6, 7 kids do what they are told, but eventually they start thinking on their own, and hey, well, I shouldn't be doing the stuff that my dad is telling me, or,
Right.
or
Well,
whatever.
and even identical twins who share the
Well,
same
they
DNA.
have to pay, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. Again, I don't even know how to fully understand it, but yeah, just noticing the human condition and how it
Yeah.
plays out in people, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah. In your practice, right, seeing kids or adult with, with issues, and uh nowadays kids, like, grew up with computer, we grew up with, cell phone, and so on and so forth. They are very impatient in life. They don't read as many books as you and I did, 40 years ago, or so, and they don't smell the roses, right? They live life uh very fast, right? So in terms of music, right, they we'll go to Spotify and listen to an album in a minute, right? 10 seconds, I don't like the track, next, as opposed to opening the book, read the book, smell the book, buying a CD or buying a vine or whatever. It, Society, science, technology with computer and cell phone is great, but and never mind social networks, but it is affecting the way that the way we think, the way that appreciate the world, or it's crazy to me to understand this stuff.
Right. Well, I yeah, I've been a therapist long enough where I've worked with people before. About half of my time was before we all had smartphones, and
Yeah.
then the second half is after. And I remember when smartphones started coming in, I I gave some presentations to parent groups about look, I think if we would have gone in front of an ethics committee and said, we have these devices, we are giving young people unlimited access, to all these things and 24/7 and like I think an ethics committee would have said you're not allowed to do this. Like, and yet we've done it and now we're looking, we're experiencing what's happening. There have been some positives, I believe, and there have been some negatives. I've definitely seen levels of anxiety and depression very much higher than they have been prior. And I can't say that that's all because of smartphones, but I think that there is a way that we are speeding up our brains. And, for those of us who have kind of a before and an after of understanding this, we have a context to it all, but there's people who, I definitely have met numerous young people who at age 8 or 9 got their first smartphone, and then they get this instant access to things which can be good, but slowing down is also really important, as you said, to smell the roses or to be able to listen to some music that might not be the music for me right now, but I might find something valuable in it if I paid, $12 for a CD and it's like I need to listen to this thing because I like or really dating myself, when we were listening to record albums, you'd have to get up to go to the next track. You couldn't just hit a button to
That's
send a
right.
CD to
To
the
flip
track.
the panel, right?
Totally, yeah. And there was something really lovely about the smell, about being in physical contact. Um, This album I just released, it's interesting. It's the first album that I've released that doesn't have a physical something attached to it. All my albums I've had, CDs, cassettes. Um, Even the one 2 years ago, I got CDs, but like this one doesn't, and it's just interesting. There's nothing in the physical world to show that it existed, which is okay. I mean, at a certain point, there will be nothing in the world to show that I ever existed, so that's okay. But it's interesting that to take music out of the completely out of the physical world somehow. It yeah. Again, there's just lots of changes happening, but I don't think we're going to fully be able to appreciate smartphones and how they've changed people, fully appreciate for another decade maybe or so. But to me, the initial data says that there's some positives and definitely some negatives.
Mm. The instant gratification thing is, I don't know how good or how bad it is in society. People, the young kids, especially, I noticed that they're constant checking in social media to see somebody wrote to them or got an email or a post, or they need to reply. Let me make an example, right? So in the radio and the YouTube, a lot of people follow the interviews. I have like 75,000 subscribers and so on and so forth. But I could post the stupid article in the history universe, completely wrong deduction, completely wrong fact. And a lot of people will go there
Mhm.
and click and all this stuff without even reading the article. We don't understand that that's the stupid article on the history of humanization, the history of, as if they need to be participant and do a check or a like without even reading, without even commenting, and so on and so forth. That is very crazy to me, man. And I noticed that a lot. Why we need to be participant of as if we have peer pressure? Hey, my friend Johnny check. My friend Peter check. Oh, now Claudio should check as well. To look good with Johnny and Peter. And I don't know what we live so fast we as pressure to be participant of something that we don't even adhere to it. So
Yeah, I hear you, and I would say this, like I think about like I spend a lot of time in the natural world. I spend a lot of time in the woods, with good friends or even alone. And I really like getting away from the constructs of humans sometimes. I'm using a computer right now as we're speaking, and I there's a lot of value in that. But what you're talking about, I look at is like, what is the fad of the day? What is like? I kind of think of some of what you're saying as like eating cotton candy. It could be really tasty and interesting in the moment, but 5 minutes later, there's no energy, or one feels tired, or one has ingested sugar only with artificial color and flavor. It's not something that sustains. So I go to the natural world a bunch because that for me is kind of mental, emotional, maybe spiritual fuel for me to sustain, to find inspiration. I suspect there's not going to be a lot of inspired music that comes out of people's articles that they post or how many likes they had on whatever social media account they're using. Like, but I suspect that the natural world is still what may or may not inspire those of us who who create to want to keep creating.
absolutely, absolutely. Before we talk about your latest album, which is very good, over the last 20 years, you have been collaborating, write and perform instrument music for modern dance company,
Mhm.
such as Rogelio Lopez and dancer, and travel to Europe several times with different projects. Feel free to elaborate or that how came about. And
Yes, so I I was I was asked originally about I don't know, 10 years ago or so um to create music for a friend of mine and her dance company as she was going to Europe, and and then I met a whole bunch of dancers and some choreographers, and writing music for dance is it's fascinating. It's amazing because there have been times where I've seen the dances in silence and then have needed to or been asked to write for that, or that I've worked with the choreographer with their vision of what they want to do, and and it's in some ways it's it appeals to both my thinking brain and my kind of creative side, because it's like there are these constructs, these are the seven or eight um, elements to be creating and to be uh, like essentially communicating, and then there's other elements where I'm thinking about what are the sounds or the ways to do this. I mean, I play guitar and piano primarily these days, but um, for some of these songs, I've recorded found sounds and I've recorded other sounds of objects and things that I believe will really convey some of these notions. For one of the projects, I was told, like, take the darkest thing you've ever written and record something 10 times darker. And I really thought about what does dark mean for me, and I found myself at the hardware store, like listening to the different chains as they hit the floor and buying different chains and using the sound of dropping chains in music objects as well. And so those things, it really is lovely for me to find other ways to express notions, ideas through sound, especially sound without words, because then I feel like for most of us, music is like our first language. Like, yeah, so I like kind of going back into this younger realm of like how would I say this if I didn't know spoken language? I hope that
Yeah,
makes
no,
sense.
no, absolutely. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think back if you were to examine and read about human beings, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years ago, right? Before there was a common language, they were expressing the way with music, right? With hitting a bongo or a watermelon at the time, whatever, and that kind of they communicated and they were expressing themselves and the mood when they were going hanging, hunting in the morning and the prey wasn't there or what to eat. And, so very, very, yeah, music and was way earlier before language creation, if you will.
Right. Right. And
And
sound was probably before
yeah,
music,
exactly
like,
right. Sound, right.
yeah, wow, if I had a time machine, I would love to go back 10,000 years, 20,000 years and just hear how humans were communicating with each other. That would be
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
no, absolutely. So I would do the same. We'll go to your music. You have done well in life. Your music has been featured in internet radio such as Sirius XM, Spy Channel. You have made the top 20 in the CMR chart. So good for you, man. Good for you. Good for you. So, and I noticed that you have, so before we talk about one day in the spring, you released, several albums in 1988, The Global Walk in 1990, and Children Only Home, But Yet Unknown, and so Song for a Potential Embrace, and so on and so forth. So you were doing it at the same time. You have your therapy going during the day, during the night. You were writing home and playing guitar and playing piano. So good for you, man. So
Yeah, again, it's always felt like this is an important part of my being. Like, probably if I was around 30,000 years ago, I would have been one of the people drawing cave images, or images on caves. You know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I, expressing the human condition while I am embodied as a human just feels important for some reason. So, yeah.
Yeah. You always try to do like every day or several hours on the week no matter, how many clients you need to see or this, your life or rain, snow, whatever it is, you throw the TV and you go to your music instrument and try to do something with it. Or
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And for me, it's also become like, how do I how do I hold the snow? How do I, on a day when I'm tired or, if, if there's been bad news or things like, how do I process that? How do I notice what's inside and kind of honor the movement of these energies? Yeah, I do actually. And sometimes I pick up instruments that I don't even really quite know how to play. Because sometimes it's interesting to be challenged with, oh, what does this do? And how do I express something in this realm? I'm not suggesting I'm good at it because I'm not, but it's still a part of a way, I don't know, like it's still a part of being a human for me somehow. Yeah.
one day in the spring, your latest album is very, very good. And feel free to elaborate that you wake up one day, you went to the kitchen or the living room where the piano is or the keyboard, and then from one sitting you did everything, or 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it took. And there
Yeah.
was how in the world
So,
somebody can do something, write
well,
an
I
album
think, yeah,
in
I didn't know I was doing it when I did it. So my recording equipment had been broken and tech support wasn't being very helpful. So I just bought a new computer and I made sure it was working and I set it up. I have a really nice piano in my home and I had all the microphones set up correctly. And I was like, great. And so it's working. So I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning and I was the only one at home and it was a rainy spring morning and it was before dawn and I just felt like I had something to say. So I stumbled over to the piano in the dark and hit record and just started playing. And I played very sparsely at first and recorded something and was like, okay, let me do that again. And then I did it again. And then the sun was coming up and my window was open and I was hearing the birds that were outside my window. And because it was spring, I was noticing the sounds of the birds were like migrating birds. They were not birds that I'm familiar with in my area in terms of their sounds. And then the sun came up, and I did 7 pieces, I guess, in a row, and then tried an eighth and kind of fell on my face on that. And so I just got up, got some caffeine, and then there were 3 musical ideas that I had been kind of playing with, and I decided to just try a few ways of playing them, and then so I had these 10 pieces, and I wasn't going to do anything with it. I have lots of things that I've recorded that probably will never go out into the world, but I I really liked how I played these pieces because they were sparse, they were not thinky at all. They were very feeling and they were kind of interpretations of the morning and what was happening on this spring morning and and so I played it for some friends and they were like, you should release this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not clever, it's not really interesting. Like my mental brain had a hard time letting go of things. And then after a while I was like, I'm just gonna kind of trust the universe here and just release it. And so I did. And it's been interesting because at first I felt very apologetic about it. Like my friends were like, "Oh, you have this new thing," and I'm like, "Yeah, but don't listen to it." It's not any good. And they were like, "Yeah, it's very different than what you've done." But the more that it's been out there, like it's now already like the second most listened to thing that I've released. And what I really like about it is that my my brain, my thinking, my ego, my cleverness didn't get mixed up with it. For me, I mean, this is too strong a word, but a friend of mine said, "Oh, it was you praying," and it doesn't feel quite true, but it was me being really present within yeah, in for that morning. Um and I was just in a program at Berkeley for a year, and one of the professors there said, you know, when you're loving in the right way or praying in the right way, it's hard to know if you're giving or you're receiving. And I would also include when one is in the creative process, in at least as I understand the right way, like it's hard to know if one is giving or receiving, but I was definitely receiving and I was definitely responding to. And so to me, it was kind of a musical dance of the morning somehow. So
Mm.
that's what this album, yeah, is and was. And I still listen to it sometimes, which is unusual for me. I often don't listen to things very often after I've released them. And but this one I still find it kind of helps my
Mm.
nervous system, you know, relax a little bit, which is important for me in this world that could be kind of loud and crazy.
Absolutely. In terms of releasing your music, you go to a particular record label, or you do most of your own, as your own, as a self-release, or you go to a record label that help you promote your music.
Yeah, so I self-release.
Yeah.
That's at the B company is somebody who promotes things for me, and I super
Yeah.
appreciate her and the people there. And yeah, so that's something that I do, and then yeah, and also sometimes I'll play shows, but even as I've gotten older, I don't know, I get kind of nervous when I perform. So like I haven't been doing that as much. And this album didn't feel like there was a way to really like I'm not convinced I could play those pieces again in that way. There was something about how I approached them. Like I use the soft pedal on the piano. I never use a soft pedal. I use it for every song, for every moment. It's the pedal that makes the keyboard move about a quarter inch over so that the hammers that typically are hitting three strings are only hitting two strings. And then the hammers that are typically hitting two strings are only hitting one string. And it's just a very different sound, particularly because the hammers are usually super tight in areas where they hit the strings, but then like it's just a different sound and a different approach that I had to this. And um, again, I look at it as kind of water flowing downhill. Like there's like when I listen to how I played this, there are things that I've never done before in terms of how I played some of these things and that I would probably never do again, but they are really artifacts of like this moment. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad, and that decision of, you know, of playing the piano and going that way, it was probably completely unconscious, right? You wake up, you 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, six, you make coffee and sit in the piano, you have something to say, you did it. It's not that, oh, tomorrow morning I'm gonna do it this way, try different. No, no, no. You wake up and sleepy, and then you did it that way. It came out very good. Good for you, man.
Yeah, thank you. No, in some ways, in a few months, I'll have been a musician for 50 years.
Oh
And I
wow.
feel like I've finally gotten to the point where like I and I'm only barely there, but I feel like I'm finally at the point where I could kind of just feel something and play it, you know. And so it's still a mystery to me what that even means, but I feel like there's a way, like I believe like we humans come into the world and then we have a way of being and then we learn language and then language puts things in boxes. So instead of me experiencing the spirit of a tree, I learn about the tree and I learn about chlorophyll and I learn about the conditions that keep the tree going. But after a certain point, if I could know all that and then forget about those things and go back to the essence of experiencing a tree, I feel like that's where I'm reaching now with music, where
Yeah.
I learned the patterns and the ways and now I've gone past a point where I can simply be back in the spirit of it with with maybe some technical ability now that I didn't have 50 years ago. And that's helping me to meet music in a different way because music is really again it's been one of my main relationships for half a century now, and the way that I relate perhaps to my wife over the years that she and I have been together is different depending on my age and her age and the things going on in our lives. And the same thing with music. Um, yeah.
You, in terms of playing live, it's a kind of independent of the money, right? Whether they pay you whatever X number of dollars per show or nothing, or you playing for a friend wedding or whatever. It's like it's difficult for you to face the crowd. It's like a motivation thing, like a self-esteem issue that you have overcome over the year, or you worry, man, yeah, I want to play an hour and a half. I need to, figure out what track I want to be cohesive during the show, or why you couldn't do that before. And then if we have that the interview 10 years ago, you say, no, 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 my music is for me, it's personal. I will put it out there. Somebody can buy the CD or the vinyl or MP3, whatever, but I would never play live in front of people. Now you say 10 years later, in my hypothetical question, you say, no, 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 now I cannot have the motivation or to play
Yeah.
live, right?
I I love playing live when people are listening. Like so the money piece is not important to me. I make money in my career as a therapist.
Yeah,
I, to me, playing live it's important for me when people are listening. And if people are listening, I would do it every day. Um, I think like what you were saying before, Claudio, about these devices that we have and people's brains being, or I was saying about people's brains being kind of speeded up and instant gratification. Like, I feel like the world is really loud right now, really noisy, and I'm not trying to compete with the noise. I'm
yeah,
allowing the world to be loud, and I'm having my own experience of, or my own vision of what is it to slow down. And I, sometimes people are uncomfortable with that because they're used to like constant dopamine pings
yeah.
and on their brain. Um and I sometimes when people don't have that available, they have some reactions to that or some responses to it of discomfort or things. And I'm actually really happy to play for people if people are okay to slow down. But to me, that's a bit of something that it just brings stuff up for me of, not wanting to feel like I'm forcing anybody to do something they don't necessarily want to do or don't feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, I go to a lot of concerts. I'm lucky where I live. I see a lot of shows in the year. Half the concert people will be either texting or picture or filming or whatever they do, right? So some musicians, famous people, they don't allow media. So if they say this particular musician does not allow for you to record or film, so please, turn off the phone right away, because if we catch you, you will be kicked off the venue, right? So, and maybe that's a good thing for a musician to do, or a venue, right? This is, you cannot bring a device. One, the artist doesn't want to be recorded, but two, you're paying good money to see Johnny Doe, whatever musician happen to be, and in the next 90 minutes, enjoy your life, right? No texting, no filming, no, right? You're paying good money, it's not free, right? So enjoy yourself, right? So no need to use the device, and if you're a neurosurgeon that need to come back to the hospital, maybe you shouldn't go to see the show, right? Because you will need the nurse will be texting you, but those are the exceptions in general, right?
Right.
Maybe device should not be allowed in venues for people to
Sure.
force
I mean,
themselves, and
it definitely also makes me wonder, like, just about us humans and why do we feel the need to keep, I can do this too. I mean, I'm guilty of it, but why do we feel the need to have to remember every moment? Like, I don't remember other moments, and that's okay. Like, they're part of what helped create who I am now. But maybe there's some snapshots of when I was 10 or 12 or 15 years old, but
Mm.
I don't go back and look at them more than maybe once every 5 years or something. So it's a very curious thing about humans, about wanting to keep things at top of mind rather than being like, oh, this is my experience now, and later I'll have a different experience.
Yeah, exactly. You can have a great an experience of something without bringing any picture. Your sister or brother will ask you, "Hey, I noticed that with your wife you went to Paris for a week. I have a great time. Do you bring any picture to show?" No, I didn't. Why not? I was there. I experienced it. It's beautiful. Paris is beautiful,
Right.
right? Yeah, we human beings are very strange, man. The more that you learn, the more you think to know them. It's me included. We are weird creatures. You finish a program at UC Berkeley the study of psychedelics. Feel free to elaborate, or because
Yeah.
that's a very rigorous program. So I'm quite
Yeah.
sure you.
So I've I've personally been curious about psychedelics for about 25 years,
Huh?
and I know some of the elders in that community, actually, in the psychedelic
Yeah.
community, and so to me it's kind of a natural, like, first of all, I wouldn't recommend psychedelics to to people. That's a personal decision if people want to do something like that. I do think there's a huge potential for healing within some of them. I also believe there's a huge potential for people getting hurt in those spaces, if they don't really know what they're doing. So the program I took was um, to be a psychedelic facilitator, and it was a year-long program, and we had a lot of the experts in the field teaching us different aspects of things, and there's a huge uh, science kind of component to this as well. And yeah, it was an amazing program because it was about physical body, spiritual realms, emotional things, indigenous cultures, and how they held these medicines, like the history of plants and the
Mm.
difference between plants and the molecules that they may produce. And I mean, there's so many different ways to look at the multidisciplinary aspects of all these. But when people are in psychedelic states, they're generally accessing um, moments of transcendence beyond space and time, or of sometimes beyond their own personal ego. And it could be really, it could be both beautiful and amazing, and or it can also be really disorienting and even traumatizing for people. So the value of having, they were training us in part because UC Berkeley has FDA approval to run some psilocybin studies with humans, and they needed to train guides to be able to sit with the people, among other things, but some to sit with people in these states. And so that was one of the reasons for my understanding of this training program. And the people I met are all phenomenal people, ranging from medical doctors to therapists to chaplains to other healers to people who are holding generationally, like they're generationally trained, from the cultures that they're from, some of them. So it
Mm.
was really a beautiful, fascinating, amazing group of people that were, yeah, that were part of it.
Good for you. Lately, there has been a lot of new research coming out of good university in the study of ayahuasca. They go to Brazil, right? Well, you can try ayahuasca in different countries. That's got to be Brazil. Brazil is well known. Costa Rica for, uh, you go to a center and shaman and do a ceremony, and people experience, a lot of very interesting and difficult stuff. They need to, they sort of face their own demon, and uh, uh, it's a lot of research nowadays done that it can be to some people very, very helpful. I don't know which percentage will be helpful versus create a damage in your brain, or you didn't feel anything about it, but it's the data is there. It's not an accident, right? So
Right. I mean, these are medicines that have been used for centuries, if not eons. Some of them, there's like psilocybin, it seems like has been used for thousands and thousands of years, and in healing ceremonies. And um, yeah, there's ways to get in trouble with these things for sure, but there's also ways in which the research often, not always, often bears like like helpful aspects to it. I mean, especially with MDMA, like even though the FDA didn't approve MDMA right now, the MAPS phase 3 trial was said that approximately 80% of people with PTSD um, didn't have PTSD 6 months later or didn't fit the diagnostic criteria for that. And that's something that there's no other medicines for PTSD. There's medicines that may help the symptoms of it, but to actually treat, so I'm sure there'll be more research done in this area. But again, people do get themselves into trouble with these things too, if they take it and just kind of roll the dice with things. So I'm always wanting to state that I would personally not recommend that people who don't know what they're doing don't do that. Um, yeah, because it's very complicated. And if there's a magic way to predict who will be hurt and who will be helped, I know the conditions that increase one or the other of those potentials, um, but if there's something definitive, I don't know what it is.
I got you. I got you. Is it difficult to make a living in the music world? Well, you do kind of both. You work, you have your day job, and you do music as a part-time on the evening. But although your music is very, very good, so is it difficult to make a living? I mean, you do it because you feel a need to do it, and you have no chance, right? You need to go to the piano every day or every 2 days and do something with it, and
Yes,
then you.
for me, this is a way of being. It's not. I mean, some money trickles in, but it's a way of being,
Okay.
and it's and I have one life, and this is part of what I want to do with this life. This one life on the planet, and
Mm,
yeah, and again, I do feel like the things that we do that help others somehow, um, I don't know, amplify, I believe, and like I do believe that some of the things that people have done for me years ago kind of have trickled out. And so it's also the way that I want to understand the human condition. And so
mm.
it really calls to me on those levels. Like there's a couple of songs of mine that have kind of developed a life of their own in some ways, but I'm doing this because it's just how I feel like I'm supposed to be living.
As if you have no chance
Yeah.
of doing it. I asked you before the interview your opinion of Carl Gustav Jung, famous psychologist, and then Sigmund Freud. Nowadays, I think Sigmund Freud is more used. It's well streamed. Carl Gustav Jung is more mystic in the background. He did a lot of research and are kind of this teaching techniques way of uh, helping out your patient is used nowadays, or there are more modern techniques to
I mean,
uh, yeah.
there's a lot of modern techniques, and I believe Jung was a mystic who was channeling again his drawings, his writings. A lot of them, I believe, are to me seem like very mystical. His symbolism and so forth. And yet, again, I think healing is about humans reaching humans, and healing can happen to me. My understanding is that healing can happen on a spiritual level, or on a physical level, or on an emotional level, and or it can happen on multiple levels, multiple of these levels. And um, it's interesting to me, like as a therapist myself, like my sense is that the best therapists are using techniques, but they're more creating a sense of connection. And then the techniques are probably not as important as the connectedness between the clinician and the person seeking help. And because and again, that's how music speaks to me. It's like that's about the connection. That's about how do I connect with people that I'll never meet, or in theory, some people may hear my music after I die. And, how do I connect? Like, I love hearing musicians that can touch me, even though they died well before I was born. Like, how do we connect with others? My sense is that that's what healing is ultimately about. It's connection, it's understanding, it's offering a place of solace or a place of, yeah, a place of how do we land when we're in a moment of difficulty with our human condition.
So, like patient can go to your office, right? And they pay a fee and they talk to you for 50 minutes. So, and so the fact that trusting somebody and then having a rapport with somebody in order to open up, which is very difficult to begin with, right? And others will go to church on Sunday and pray to God or Virgin Mary or whatever, as if they want to be heard, and so forth. And like in your case, do psychotherapists go to other psychotherapists? How you go about it, right? So you talk to other psychotherapists so they can listen to your issues, trouble, emotion, problems, difficulty
Sure.
as well.
I have in the
Very
past for
common.
sure. Yeah, I have. Yeah. No, I think because I believe in it. I believe in the
Yeah,
process of it and excuse me, and the value of spending time with a healer. It's
yeah,
we we all will need healing at some point in our lives. I believe that.
yeah. I got
Yeah.
it. I got it.
Even the
What is
healer. Yeah.
yeah? What are you working nowadays? Music related and
Well, it's
there's
interesting. So I never knew that I would do a solo piano album like I just did.
yeah.
Now, like I find myself like doing electronic music, which I
All
haven't really done much of, but that's
right.
fun to me. And I always purchase quirky instruments when I find them. So I just purchased an instrument from the late or mid 1700s called a grand harmonicon, which is a bunch of wine glasses in different shapes and sizes that rub your fingers on in circular motions. And um, uh, I I just bought a bowed psaltery, which is an instrument that use a bow to. There's probably about 30 drone strings like on it. Like there's so many ways of creating sound that I don't want to be caught in just one way of creating music. Yeah, and I've been getting a lot of like wooden flutes lately. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be very different. I know that.
You well, I will be the first person listening to your stuff, man. No
Thank you,
question.
man.
David, it was very nice talking to you. You are a great guy, and I'm happy that you work as a psychotherapy, trying to help out. Obviously, I don't know, the word cure perhaps doesn't exist. Treat people, maybe it's a better way to do it. Human beings we are very complicated uh, creature, right? We can go and I don't know, DSM-4 or 5 now and look at scriptural, these and therefore you have the following symptom, you are in this category and that bucket, and I'm in the spectrum myself, so it's like it's very, very, very difficult. I mean, it's not that straightforward to understand one another, and we try to do the best in this world. Finding a wife, go to college, finding a job, but music it could give us lot of satisfaction, and music hopefully can save the world. Maybe we're doomed to, as a society. I don't know, but music, art and painting or whatever, is a beautiful thing, man.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, and even if we are doomed, at least we have art and music and connection and beauty
Yeah,
head on that path. Yeah. Claudia, I really appreciate your time and your
no
questions,
problem.
energy
Thank
and
you.
to the music. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck with
You
everything.
too. Thank you, Rich. Very nice talking to you. Have a good day then. Bye.
Bye-bye.